So Jennifer Buyck is one of our former residents in Chicago. She is an architect with a doctorate in aesthetics and also teaches urban planning at Université Gustave Eiffel in Paris. The project was a continuation of her previous work in the Mississippi Delta, and her intention was, I quote, to explore the environmental history of Chicago, to discover the Windy City's relation to its land, seeking to draw fresh attention to the biological world and the urban world.
So talking about the Chicago River at that scale, in this context, is for me a way to grasp what we called the Anthropocene.
The only place in the continent where the Great Prairie met the Great Lakes was essentially between what is now Hyde Park and the South Branch of the Chicago River. Everywhere else, there were savannas or sand dunes or other conditions that mediated between the prairie actually meeting the lake.
People's perception of the river is so overwhelmingly negative. They are surprised that things are alive in it. They are shocked that they don't need to go rush to the hospital if they fall in. All these things that come from being so separated. So our goal in building the Wild Mile is to not only build artificial habitat structures like floating gardens. We have mussel bunkers that host freshwater mussels that should be plentiful throughout the river. We do a lot of different things that invite nature back into the environment, but then also invite those people to come connect with it.
I think it's really exciting to see that transformation, but it's not to say that there aren't still challenges, especially now. We're starting to see with climate change, especially this summer, we're starting to see these increased, very damaging storm events, high flash flood problems, and all of that water is coming from the land around it. And like Phil explained, everything that leads to a lot of water pollution and water quality challenges. It floods communities. It causes destruction in habitat. So that's very concerning to us because there's so many years of investment that climate change is starting to put some of that at risk.
What is the consequence of that? What do we have to repair every time we get these extreme events? And how do we take that top down? How do we reduce the extremes in the space that we've got, which is difficult, but it's one of the reasons that things being floating is helpful. You can't have the space horizontally, but if you use the space vertically very well, there are ways to get around. So we look at things like we have the freshwater mussel bunkers. So we have an ability to hold clean sand and clean substrate that these freshwater mussels burrow into that is going to ride out all these intense storms and the things that might cover them up and might pollute them. The gardens that we have, on a shoreline, they might get swept away by these powerful storms. They might get ripped up, or their roots might not be able to grab on like they're supposed to. But if everything's floating, you have a reservoir where these plants can then reproduce after these big storm events, and they can introduce that seed. It's about habitat connectivity and doing so in a way that reflects the reality.
Here, in terms of town planning, there are tools, and you are planners, for example. So it gives me hope. But as you said, Ron, the big investments has been given to engineers. Sorry, I'm summarized, and I know I'm wrong, but you knew what I mean. The biggest investment hasn't been given to the planners. So the change I have seen in the Mississippi Delta, where the private actors are really strong, and where there is no planner anymore. I'm summarizing. It's also occurring here, but not at the same scale.
Just last month, a team that I'm on received a National Science Foundation grant for $750,000 over 3 years, working to explore inequities of access to water infrastructure in Chicago. The project is led by political scientists. So the water is political. It's also hyper-local. So, the people that are impacted by water quality are your neighbor. The people that are impacted by water quantity may very well be your neighbor. It could be yourself.
So I think in a lot of cases, the bottom gets forgotten. The grassroots things get forgotten and dismissed as being ineffective, but these are oftentimes the things that are done by most people. So if we're in this situation where you have to do things from the ground up in order to start pushing, and it seems like some way we don't get any help from the top down.
There's, miles and miles of these little tributary streams and creeks that are in the southwest suburbs that we do a lot of our projects in large-scale landscape restoration work in forest preserves and along riverbanks down there. But all of those areas is where some of the richest and most well-protected and well-managed habitats are. But it's all part of the same system. So the fish and mussels and other, beavers and all the things that live in the river also come downtown. And it's part of this bigger watershed, really.
We figured out how to put a city on top of a swamp and put it up on stilts, and we figured out, and we're paying for it, and we figured out how to reverse the river going the way that didn't poison us, and we figured out all these incredible engineering feats. I'm so sure that we can figure out how to let nature do what it needs to do again. So it's challenging now because we don't know what the tools look like, but I think eventually, and given this time and these experiments in places like Chicago, we can start to figure that out.